Joining us on the How Did You podcast today is all-around great guy, Call of Duty League commentator Lando, who you may know as Mr. Rostermania for the old fans of the UMG days. But how are you doing today, Lando?
I'm doing good, man. I appreciate you for having me on. For those who are listening to the podcast, I was actually supposed to be on like 3 or 4 months ago, but I suck at email. So here we are. Here we are, Taylor.
If we were to maybe throw it back 3 or 4 months' time, or even further, what was Lando or Landon's life like before esports? What kind of games was he playing? Who was Landon?
Before esports, I was a sports guy. Oh, I guess I still am a sports guy, but somebody who was like super into playing basketball, lived, breathed, played that only. Like got into gaming a little bit, but mostly would play like casual sports games on the side. I still love like NBA 2K, Madden, MLB The Show. All your American sports, even some FIFA. As I've gotten older, love me some FIFA, Ultimate Team especially. But yeah, it was just basically a more casual gamer. Played a lot of sports stuff. Was heavily into basketball. That was going to be my thing. That was like what I had designated for the longest time, was that I was going to play basketball. That was going to be it. Um, and then I don't know, like it all obviously changed over time, but still into those same sports games. But obviously a lot has changed since then. So
You mentioned a lot has changed, and obviously you have great potential. So you could have gone into a commentator, analyst role of any of those games. But what made you choose Call of Duty? Was it that it was a game that you were playing when you were younger, or did you get encompassed in, I don't know, Call of Duty Black Ops 2 championships being advertised on the Xbox dashboard, for example? Who knows?
right, yeah. I'm trying to think. I got really into like YouTube, the whole content side of thing, around with like MW2 Black Ops 1 was happening. And before I watched competitive, I was actually watching the YouTubers. So I was watching, like, for those who remember, like Woody's Gamer Tag or XJaws. I'd watched some of the first like T Martin videos where he had like jumps and spots, all that stuff. I was super into that. And I was like, okay, I love these. And I actually was watching their videos before I bought the game themselves. And I was like, okay, Christmas is coming up. Black Ops 1 is out. I got to play this. And I'd played it Call of Duty on and off a little bit. Like my dad had like Call of Duty Big Red 1 and a few other games like on the PC. So I played those. I was familiar with it. My friends had me play like actually COD 4, which if I would have known that at the time, I would have ripped that console out of their house and that game, and I would have taken it home and grinded it. But little did I know what I was playing at the time. But got my hands on like Black Ops 1 officially, fell in love, loved the game, played it with friends, played zombies till like super late at night, Kino der Toten all the time. And then just as time went on, I guess you could say like sports was up here, and then gaming started to kind of take it over on that pedestal. And whenever it came down to college time, if I decided if I was going to play sports in college, I was like, nope, I'm going to become an esports commentator. And my parents lost their mind. So that's kind of how it went. And I started watching like the broadcasts around like, I guess because like around the Black Ops 2 times. A little bit before then I had like seen it, but not really like dived into it. But a lot of it was based off the content. So I was really somebody who was content first, YouTuber streams first, and then that eventually led me into watching the esports, watching my first tournament, which I actually don't know what my first tournament was. It was somewhere before Black Ops 2 champs for sure, but I couldn't tell you exactly what it was. And then went on from there.
If we were to think back to those days, certain organizations worked with the CWL at that point, like UMG. And obviously, UMG helped birth Mr. Rostermania, who many longtime fans of you would know who that is. How was it to kind of, I guess, take the first analytical step of your journey? Because today you're known as the guy who will sit in the green rooms, the backstage, and basically make notes for the next matches that are coming up.
Yeah, so Mr. Ostromania developed in somewhat of an interesting way. So I was kind of on the outside of the scene. This was also during that whole time where I was going from high school into college or university, and I was trying to figure out, okay, what is it like I truly want to do? Like I had no envisionment of like what I wanted my major to be. I could say like, sports or sports science, or, I liked computers at the time. So I was like, maybe computer science. I had no idea really what I wanted to do. And so kind of during that time, I was like, okay, I got to do something. So I ended up making the Twitter that was originally called MLG Rostermania. And I was like, you know what? I love roster mania. These like tweets are popping whenever we hear different things going on. That was my favorite time of the year. Was like, okay, where are teams going? Where are players going? And that was always the biggest problem that I had was as a more casual viewer, I was like, I don't know where my favorite players are going because back then players literally changed every event. Like it was basically every single team was different going into, 1 month to the next month. A guy probably was on like three teams. And it was interesting to follow that, but there was nobody who was really designating themselves to that exact thing. And so I made a Twitter one day and I was like, we'll just see where this goes. And I think my first tweet I want to say was like, it was right when Advanced Warfare had dropped, which was a perfect time for me because that's when the Optic Dynasty was starting to form. So there was a lot of that juice that was, of course, there. Just a lot of changes happened between Ghost and AW. Like that was a, very professional step for the league. Like we all remember how many events there were in Ghost, but specifically in AW. That's when the league really started to form. Organizations started to get more serious about it because they saw the potential for these past few years. And I basically made the Twitter, updated it as time went on, got myself some connections with some players, with some back end people. I'm trying to think too, like I was like on the grind. Like I was probably like awake most hours just seeing if anybody would tweet me something. I was on Xbox all the time, and back then you could actually see if you just typed in a player's name on Xbox, you could see if they changed their gamer tag, and that was the easiest way. Players never figured that out for whatever reason. On like the Xbox One, whenever somebody would change their gamer tag, you could actually see it without being a friend of theirs. So you could, and players were always changing their gamer tags as they join a new team. And so that was actually a way that I was figuring out these rosters, and a lot of other people weren't. So just little things like that started to develop as time went on. That eventually led me to getting noticed by the Sticks podcast with Kingdom Soldier, joined their crew
What a
after being
legend.
a very dedicated viewer. Man, absolutely. One of the guys who got me literally into the esport, if not the content side of it, where I am today. Was able to join their podcast through those two things. That got me my first opportunity from UMG, UMG Dallas 2015. And really from there, me and UMG stayed close. And forget what, like in 2016, 2017, around that time, they brought me in full time to basically be a full time commentator for them. So sprouted into something great.
Well, from UMG, we'll qu- quickly transfer over to CDL because obviously CWL was a thing, but during July 2020, you joined the CDL full time and became a new commentator pair with Study. How did you find joining the league? Because obviously it was a fresh face, fresh start, and although you've been doing it kind of for the CWL and for UMG and events like that, how did it feel to be part of the new kind of franchise league, I guess?
Yeah, it was definitely new because I was actually a huge I loved the way that the league was going into. I love the whole franchising thing. Like I said, I come from like a big sports background. I love watching sports. So I hear that like, hey, we're kind of sportsifying it, not to the point where it's, bad because there is that cross pollination where it's like this is too much sports or this isn't enough esports, whatever. But I was loving what they were doing at the time, and I was like, this is awesome. This is the perfect thing, for the league. And so I was really enjoying myself. I love the formats. I love the fact that we were, going to different locations, and there were teams who had local fan bases and all that stuff. And then whenever I got the call to join him. Like you said, I think it was July of 2020. I was working at Envy at the time, and I honestly couldn't believe it because they basically called me and said, like, hey, we'd like for you to do something with the CDL. And I was like, okay, cool. Well, that sounds awesome. I had no idea what they were talking about was being a commentator for them. I kind of flipped out a little bit in a good way. I was like, this is awesome, super excited for the opportunity. And all I wanted to know was who I was commentating with. I was just like, am I going to be like an analyst? Like, I'm sure I'm probably going to be a play by play. Like, you probably don't want me to be an analyst. Like, how is this really going to roll? And they told me I was with Study, and I'm like, we're going to be great. This is going to be awesome. But was very, very nervous. I go back sometimes and listen to my first ever CDL cast, and it's just a lot of ifs, ands, maybe, like all that stuff. Not good. And so that has been something that, while I did have a lot of experience, a lot of history commentating that game, the awareness of what that role means. I hold a very big respect for the commentating role of somebody who works in Call of Duty. Like if you are listed as a professional Call of Duty commentator, you work for the league. I hold that with tremendous respect and a lot of awareness of the people who have come before me, the people who I'm still working with. I think are unbelievable, the best in the business. And so the fact that I get to follow in the footsteps of all those people, I think all of that started to kind of get to me, at least at first. Now it started to level out as the years go on. But definitely was a huge honor to join them in the middle of the first year of franchising, and then from this point on, and like I said, to be a part of this incredible team, to be alongside a study is literally was a dream. It was a dream for sure.
I'm gonna, as much as we've thrown it forward, I want to throw it back a little bit. Obviously, you joined Envy, and I'd be quite curious to know what was it like at Envy. Like, what were you getting up to those times? Because some of us may not know your time at Envy, and some of us may not know what it was like to be at Envy before it turned into Optic.
Yeah, so it was a really cool time actually. So what ended up happening was at UMG, not only was I commentating basically every game under the sun. At that point, we were doing mobile games. We were doing. We actually had Friday Fortnite for those that remember that. We
Oh,
were a
that's
part
great.
of that on the ground level. Yeah, like it was a wild time. That stuff started to fizzle out a little bit, and I was like, gosh, I just like Call of Duty is always my thing. Like it was always my thing. I was doing all these other games, and I was like, maybe there's a way where I can still, just exclusively do Call of Duty. And when franchising started, I had a few people hit my line about content because they were watching a show that I was doing for UMG called Esports Dispatch, a show that I still think was ahead of its time. Followed a very similar format to Fox Sports, ESPN shows that you watch nowadays. It was a two-man crew, me and my good friend Matt. We worked on that show for UMG, basically just in our spare time, and we were racking up lots of views. I think we had reached, like I said, I forget, it was a little under a year of working on these episodes that were like 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes max. Sometimes we had interviews and whatnot, but like I said, we were entering into the franchising era around that time. It was like, I think it was World War II into Black Ops 4, and then maybe a touch of franchising was in there coming into MW. And we ended up accruing like over 1 million views total in like under a year on that show. And I was like, okay, there's definitely something that we have going on here. And we had some exclusive interviews. Like I was really familiar with all the guys that I've been commentating over at UMG. So the Illies, Dashy, Simp. Like I developed a great relationship with those guys because I was commentating over them every night. And so we had a lot of those first interviews, a really good opportunity there. And so Envy, specifically Hastro, saw that. And he offered me a position to basically do the same thing over at Envy. And so we went from the Esports Dispatch at UMG and we changed it up and went to Off the Break, a part of Envy and what they were doing at the time, which was Envy TV, their broadcast side of things. So they have like an Overwatch show. They eventually had a Valorant show. Then I was the Call of Duty guy. And so that's kind of what I was doing at Envy for a year until the CDL thing became more permanent, more full time, jumping into that second season. So, yeah, man.
It's quite fascinating stuff because there's a lot of stuff that people don't understand that goes on behind the scenes. And obviously, just because you play, well, just because you commentate Call of Duty, sorry, doesn't mean you play Call of Duty as much as you do. So what games do you enjoy outside of Call of Duty?
Oh man, that's a good question. I mean, I would say I don't know, kind of the average stuff. Like I would say I am probably the least like if you were to say like gamer in terms of like how much are you playing? I'm probably the least out of it when it comes down to the talent team. Like I will play Call of Duty. That's my game. Obviously, every year, whatever the title is, I'm playing the heck out of it. And when we have ranked and stuff like that, I'm grinding that with the crew as much as possible. But really, very casual. Like I'll play some sports games. Like I said, like NBA 2K is always I play that every year. MLB, Madden. Like I'll play like the games that are going on right now. So I'll play like the Overwatches. I'll play the Apex Legends. Valorant. I was playing that for a lot at least. Up until like the season or and up until last season, and then in this off season, I'm playing a little bit of it. And obviously with a baby, it's not been easy to do that. But yeah, man, like not a ton of games. Like I hear everybody that's in the green room always talk about like, yeah, like this game's coming out. Like Bryce is so into games. He'll come up to me and be like, yeah, I'm playing this submarine zombie shooter RPG. I'm like, I don't know what that is. I don't even know how to describe that. I'm glad that you're having a great time with it, but I'm just gonna play my very basic sports game over here, and that's it. And then also apps. I love myself some good applications on the iPhone. So that's where I stand.
You mentioned baby Lando. How great is it to have become a dad? Because it came halfway through the season,
It
and
did.
it must be a great feeling.
Oh man, it's amazing. I I wasn't for sure how to feel about it. I was very nervous when my wife first, had told me about it. I was like, okay, like this is the moment that I've been seeing in all these movies for years about like the dad's reaction of, of becoming a father. What's that like? And so I was very nervous. I would say like throughout the whole process because eventually things kind of normal out. But as soon as I saw her for the first time, heard her voice, and really just got to hold her and see my wife hold her and stuff. It was like, okay, we're all good. And so it was really weird. It was like, um, I've had a hard time describing because I've had a lot of people ask, like, what does it actually like feel like? Like, is it really, what it seems like or what people have described it? I think it's probably different for everybody. As a dad, it's always different than mom, of course. Because she's been carrying the child. I've just been like, hey, I'm over here. I'm happy to help. Do whatever you can, sweetheart. But yeah, I don't know. It's like whenever I don't know. It's like now that I have her, it's almost like I really don't care about the things I used to care about, like the little things about, I don't know, anything, whether it's just personal stuff, if it's, just jobs, if it's just, life stuff. It just doesn't really matter as much because all that I know is that I've got my wife, got my baby, and if that is all that I have, I'm good with that. And so it's an incredible feeling. It really is, man. It's been a blessing. It only continues to be more of a blessing, and it's been a blast to have this time because we actually thought that she might be born in the middle or like my wife might go into labor in the middle of a series. And so Jay and I were ready for this. We're like, this probably is going to happen. And it was actually funny. I forget what day it was, what match we were casting. But my wife texted me right as soon as like a day was over. One of our, regular online days was probably like major three, major four. No, it was major four qualifiers. And I was in the final green room chat. It was me, Study, Miles, and Chance. And I was like, guys, I just got a text from the wife, and they're like, what's going on? And I'm like, I think it might be happening. I think it might be happening. They're like, go, 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 go. And I was like, okay, I'm out of here. And it was so funny because, days after, whenever I come back home after being at the hospital for 2 to 3 days, I was still in the Discord, which is really funny. It was like a funny memory of like, oh yeah, my PC just kind of left it all on throughout the process. But thankfully, it didn't happen in the middle of a match, but it definitely would have been funny if it would have been. But thankfully, time permitting, now that the off season's been going on, I've been able to spend a lot of time with her, and that's where I've been during this off season time. So,
Also, thankfully, Bryce stepped in, I'm pretty sure, to kind
yep,
of cover the first few days. And
you did.
massive respect to you because obviously it wasn't long after the baby was born that you had to fly out. I think it would have been, like you say, major four. You absolutely smashed the casts and absolutely
Thank you,
smashed
man.
it for the rest of the season. But obviously, you kind of mentioned the green room, and we've, well, I've spoken to Miles and I've asked his behind the scenes kind of warm up story, and he says that him and Chance sing Queen to each other. Do you and
It's true.
Study have?
I can confirm that. I can confirm that.
It just cracks me up thinking about it. But do you and Study have a kind of preparation idea, or do you have one personally? Like, do you wake up and do something completely different that you wouldn't do on show days, or?
Yeah, I don't know. A lot of people know, and as you mentioned it, like I'm kind of the nerd stats guy. I love myself some research. Like I said, I come from sports. I got my degree at Full Sail University for sportscasting, and all they preach is your research, research, research. It's not all about research by any means, but it's a very important thing that I take very dearly. So I've kind of implemented that into Study and I a little. I would say if we have like a routine, it's not the same thing every time. It's mostly him and I will the night before a match, depending on time. Like if we get out really late, for example, we probably won't meet in our hotel rooms that night. But usually we'll meet in one of our hotel rooms. We'll talk over the series or series that we have and just kind of get a general idea of like what are the storylines, what are the things that we want to talk about. Depending, he may have done some research in terms of like, hey, I want to talk about this and like the S&D, for example. Or I could be like, hey, it'd be really cool if we could talk about this player in the hard point or the control, or as the map progresses and stuff like that. So it's never anything specific, but I would say if there is like a pattern that we follow, it's usually meeting up the night before a match, whatever day it is, talking over stuff, and then right before a series, we'll usually hit that again of like, okay, what do we want to talk about? Study's usually very focused. Like, I love Jay, has one of the greatest personalities of a person I've ever met in my entire life. But right before we get ready to cast, he locks in, and I always try to be like, let's have some fun. Like, hey, I'm over here. Like, I try to mess with him a little bit, and it usually gets him to laugh. So my goal is to make Jay laugh right before we go on camera, and just to make sure that we both have those storylines in our mind, because you never want to have too much of one versus the other. You never want to have too much stats, too much information, because it's just not fun. But also at the same time, you don't want to just be, as much as what does sound like a great time. You don't want to laugh the entire cast, because that's not the goal either. You do have information that you need to issue out to the people. But yeah, just trying to find that mix, try to find that good middle, that good center of the both.
It's quite interesting that you mentioned storylines because that's my next question. Obviously, at the moment, we're going through a Rostermania season where anything could happen at this point because Optic decided to drop the team,
Yeah.
well, half of it at least, and then bring it back the next day. And then teams that we didn't expect that are coming together, players aren't possibly going to be in teams next year. How do you feel, obviously, as an analyst, as a commentator, caster, however you want to look at it, or even as a fan, that we may not see some Call of Duty legends like Crim or Clay on a team? Like, obviously, Crim's got an announcement this Friday, but we all know Crim, it literally could be that he's brought a new set of night vision goggles.
That's a very fair point, and I'd say that probably needs to be like in the top three expectations of what that Crim announcement is going to be. But yeah, man, it hurts. Like, I remember it was like the Scump video. It was like him and Hex were like having a sit down conversation about retiring right before champs, and I was on my flight getting ready to fly from Dallas to LA, and I was sitting there and I was like, I've got to watch this. So they start calling everybody's numbers or whatever it is, hey, section 1, section 2, whatever. And I'm like, okay, they've already called me. I have to see what they're going to say, because I'm not going to get on this plane. I can get Wi-Fi or whatever, but I'm going to miss it by that point. Like, I cannot get on this flight and not find out what's going to happen. And right as like they're like, okay, final call, if you will, I'm like, all right, let me just see. And then they start talking, and it doesn't sound like anything is talking about retirement. I'm like, okay, I gotta get on the plane. Like, I'm very into what's going on with the veterans. I'm always very into the big stories and stuff out there that's going on. But I tell you what, man, I truly, truly have no idea what's gonna happen with Kerm and Clay. I will be very sad as a commentator, ultimately as a fan, which is truly what I am at the end of the day, just a fan of the game, a fan of the esport, a fan of the personalities that we have. If those guys, do end up hanging it up, or if they are going to, I don't know what happens with Clay, if he's going to be in challengers, if Krim decides to go challenge, whatever it may be, not having them at least in the space, more specifically, not in the CDL of all things, would really, I don't know. It hurts. It hurts. I mean, we as commentators love to tell stories, and they have, novels of information to pull from, so many great things to grab and point out. That's not to say that I'm also excited for the upcoming players and what their stories develop into, but there is a part of me that holds on to the old days, as we all do. The fact that like, hey, Scump at some point is going to retire. I'm like, don't tell me that. I don't want to hear that ever. And so, like I said, whenever I saw that before I landed on my plane, I'm like, tell me it's not happening. Tell me it's not true. And thankfully, it wasn't at the time. But the same thing goes for Krim. Same thing goes for Clay. The same thing goes for every player who eventually decides to hang it up. You never want to see it. You always wish the best for them. But one thing that pains me is that if that player wants to keep going, wants to keep playing, if they're ready to hang it up, that's totally fine. But if they want to keep going, part of my heart goes out to them, because we'll miss them. We'll miss them playing. That's for sure.
It's quite interesting that you mentioned players that we'll miss. Obviously, we've seen quite a few retire in the past 2, 3 seasons, maybe so. But if you had to bring one of them back, who would it be?
Oh man, that's a wonderful question. I gotta think here. The players that have retired. Um, I'm trying to think of like where they could fit on different teams. I, that's one of them that I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about Aches. I'm thinking about Formal. Thinking about Karma. Thinking about Apathy. A few other names as well. Oh, Zuma as well. Oh, this is difficult. I don't know. If I had to pick one, I would say I might go with Damon. I'd probably go with Karma. But if we're talking, on the story side of things, if we could see like that player back in their prime form, I'll change the question up a little bit. I might want Aches. I might want Aches out of those. I don't know.
Are we talking Optic Champs Denier X?
We might be talking about that one. We could be talking about Ghost Aches, Black Ops 2 Aches, Patty Cakes, whatever, the bathroom breaks.
Yeah.
Yep, there we go. Yeah.
um, Speaking of which, obviously prepared a few questions beforehand, spoke about how I'd gone to Reddit, and there is a question on there that asks, "What is your most underrated roster move that we've seen so far
Like of all time or like CDL?
of the current season?"
Oh, the current season. Okay. Most underrated roster move so far. Actually, I want to pull it up really quick. I'm gonna pull up the teams because I'm curious to like figure out, like kind of narrow it down a little bit because there are a few that I think have gone under the radar that deserve a lot of praise. And okay, this is the one I was actually thinking about. I would say one of my favorites that may go under the radar is Afro to Minnesota. I'm very that's kind of more of an underrated one, possibly. I don't know what other people's opinions are. But I really like the fact that Minnesota decided to go with somebody like him. I think that he has a top 5 player in the game type of ceiling to him. We've at times, and especially last year at the start of Vanguard, a lot of us as talent will jump into the green room, or rather, just jump into a Discord call and see what scrimmages we can get into. And I watched a lot of London this past off season, and just the things that Afro was doing was incredible. And I think, with how inconsistent that London has been throughout these past 2 seasons, I know last year they had a great moment where it looked like everything was starting to align, and then things started to drop off. I think Afro going to Minnesota with that team will be a slept on move. I thought a lot of people I thought he was going to be like, go from London to Toronto, and that was going to be it. No North American teams really reach out to him. So I'm very glad to hear that at the very least, Minnesota did, and I think that he will be their piece if they stay together. For example, I think that he will be their guy in a move that they look back on, and maybe a lot of other CDL teams look back on and are like, "Gosh, we really should have invested in that Afro guy." So
There's quite a lot of changes, but another question from Reddit, really quick: do you think there should be a players' union, considering it is their kind of workspace?
yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I'm not like super familiar with. I mean, I know what sports unions and different things like that, how they work. I will say that I am all for players having. I'm trying to think of the right word to say, but basically their opinions or their rights made more clear, if that makes sense. So I wouldn't say that I'm opposed to a players union. I wouldn't say that I'm also unbelievably ready for it. Like, let's go for it. But I would say that I'm very interested in having that conversation, or at least seeing what that would look like. I know there's been a lot of times in past years. I remember players talking about that, like back in Ghost, and different things like that. I think I'm all for wanting to make sure that the esport is in the best place that it can possibly be. That's the reason why I commentate. That's the reason why I do content. The reason why I do the things that I do is I want to see the league succeed. And if that means that there's a players union, then I'm all for it.
Well, I've got a very interesting note here that says kidnap a commentator. And I will preface this.
Okay, okay.
um, All Stars. Let's say we're all going to have some fun. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff floating around Twitter at the moment with Warzone versus CDL players, possible All Stars World Cup, just to have a little bit of fun during the off season.
Yeah.
But if the casters or commentators had a bit of fun and you had to kidnap a commentator, um, who would you break out of their pair for you?
Okay, so if I wanted to basically work alongside of another caster. Okay, interesting. Um I would say off the top of my head, just because specifically we have a lot of history together. A lot of times, whenever I've done content, I instantly look toward this guy just off the rip, and that's Chance. I think Chance is great. Love what he's love like how he's progressed as an analyst over the years. We both came into the scene at the basically the exact same time. It was like around AW. Whenever like the caster competitions and stuff were coming around, I've always respected his work ethic. We both are very much nerds when it comes down to stats. So I would say I'd pick Chance. Have a nice little run with Chance, cast a series or two. Be fun. Be a fun time.
I reckon it would be. I'm guessing that leaves Miles and Study together, which also sounds like another pairing that could be quite fun. I've
That would
always
be.
thought that it'd be great for maybe All Star season that we just maybe just throw it all out the rule book out the window and just go for it. Why not?
I'm cool with that. Yeah.
But another question from Reddit, really quick: how do you come up with your names like TJ the DJ and obviously the Human Turret?
I don't think I came up with a human turret. I'll be honest with you. That was not me. I've kind of taken that over and just been like, yeah, I'm the guy who says human turret all the time. But honestly, like there are a lot of different times where I'm listening to sports or I'm listening to different broadcasts. It could be really anything, any area of media. And I'll like hear a nickname or I'll hear whether it's just stuff that I include in my commentary. But at times a lot of people hear about the nicknames and stuff like that. And I'll just kind of pull out a book, pull out some notes, whether it's on my phone all the time. I'm always on my phone, like writing down like little funny quips here and there, different lines and stuff. And then there'll be times where I'm just like, yeah, like let me just think of a nickname for methods. Let me think of a nickname for this guy, or I'll like go down a list of players. And I'm like, you know what? How do we identify this player? Like, how can we really make this guy, how can we like fit in with his personality, something that really fits, whether it's his, prior career, where he's from, what he's about, all that stuff. So yeah, man, it's really just sitting down, middle of research. Honestly, it's just the middle of like sometimes I'm just writing down some prep for a match, and I'm like, you know what, that would actually be a really funny name. And so that's where, like the Alaskan Assassin came from. I was like looking up Draza, and I was like, it's really weird that he is from Alaska. Like I kind of forget about that sometimes, and that kind of does describe his story. Like we've never had a COD pro come from Alaska, at least as far as I'm aware. That's a big part of his story, was that he took a huge risk. He came to the better part of the United States and started to grind, but he had to move away from his family, he had to move away from his home state, and it kind of fit perfectly with what he's about. He's a no nonsense type of guy. He's hilarious, and yeah, I'm glad that one stuck. And I have a lot more for future seasons as well, so there are more coming, I can promise you that.
Interesting. Let's have a little bit more fun. Somebody on Reddit, completely not Call of Duty related, wants to know what
Okay.
would be your last meal, who would cook it, and who would you
Oh,
eat it with?
last meal.
It's a bit
Who would
dark, but
cook it? I don't. I'll be honest. I'm not like super into like chefs. For example, I don't really follow a whole lot of that stuff, like culinary. I don't know. So I will leave it up to the restaurant, I guess. But I would say a nice fine steak or just a cheeseburger. I like burgers. I like myself a good cheeseburger. Maybe that or a nice prime rib, maybe filet mignon, perhaps. Nice six. You know what? It's last meal. Let's go 8 ounces. Why not? And again, just the finest steak chef that exists. And who I would have it with, I'm gonna pick two people: my wife and my daughter. That'd be the ones. I know. Tears. Tears on the podcast right now.
Another question. How do you wish to be remembered in Call of Duty or just in life?
That's a great question, man. I would say really for both, somebody who just in general worked hard, is trying to work as hard as possible to not just reach their potential to do what I believe I've been called to do, but somebody who worked really hard, somebody who never had a day where it was like, yeah, I'm just gonna kind of slack off a little bit. That's just not my way of doing things. Somebody who was working hard, somebody who was a good father, a good husband, most importantly, good family guy. I don't know, just somebody who worked really hard, somebody who was willing to go the extra mile, at all times. At least, not, I don't act like I do that every time, but would love to try to do that every time. Um, and somebody who loves, especially when we talk about Call of Duty, somebody who truly loves this esport, and will do whatever role required, to be involved in some capacity. They may at some point say like, okay, you're done with the whole casting side of things. I'm like, okay, well, can I be like a greeter at the door? Like, could I hand out some pamphlets perhaps? Or, maybe I could wear a mascot suit of some sort, like put me in a rocker outfit, whatever it may be. I love this game. I love this esport. I love the players and people that are involved with it. And I want to see it succeed at the end of the day. That's what this is all about. So, somebody who really wanted to see this esport go as far as it possibly could. And I don't know, somebody who kind of grew up with the game a little bit. And was kind of willing to do whatever it takes to make sure that what he enjoys, what he loves, is put as high up and given as much attention as it deserves.
I can completely understand why you'd want to be like that because the amount of effort you've put in now will only continue in that respect. But if we had to think towards the future, because obviously Modern Warfare 2 is a 2 year season, and we don't truly know what is going to be announced yet, and we don't know what to expect. But what is in the future for you, or what is in the future for Call of Duty? Do say for some reason, if you do have to go on the desk, would you go on the desk? Did you enjoy being on the desk? Because last time you were, you smashed it. But
Thank
what
you,
can
man.
we expect out of Lando in the future?
Yeah, man. I would say I honestly don't know 100% what my future holds. Like I said, my goal is to always be involved in the CDL in some capacity. Obviously, I love commentating. I love doing anything that involves me being on camera, telling the stories that I truly do love. But I would say, what is coming up for me is I'm definitely going to be doing some more content. That's something that I really want to work on coming into this season, is to be more content filled. So I'm working on a lot of podcasts on the back end to try to make sure that maybe the talent could possibly be involved with it. Just giving us another platform where we can all be together and really, like I said, talk about the stories that we love to talk about, and kind of expand upon the things that maybe we don't get to in the confines of a broadcast. But yeah, I mean, I would talk about, when it comes into this season, I would never oppose an opportunity to cast and host, or to host, or whatever it may be. I would say that I definitely have a bigger passion for casting, because to me, there is just so many like you can always, and I'm not saying this doesn't happen with hosting. I'm just not as familiar with hosting, or at least from a commentary perspective. There are so many ways that you can get better at that. And to me, the whole process of getting better, working on different, like, you can always say something better. You can always listen to yourself cast over a certain moment and you're like, I could have done that better in some regard, whether it was a pause, whether it was the inflection, if it was the tone, if it was even just the word that I said, it could have been better. And to me, maximizing, trying to figure out that perfection, you'll never be able to do it. But I'd like to act as if that's the case. And so that to me is what makes commentating so interesting. It's so much fun. Is that it really is this, huge. I actually tweeted out not long ago a guy named Mike Tirico, who does Monday Night Football, works with, some of the, basically one of the biggest broadcasters in the world, especially for, like, does the Olympics and stuff like that. But he basically had made it known that, like, live commentary is almost like a 3.5 hour open book oral exam of, did you do your prep this week? And that is literally, to me, the best definition of live commentary that I've ever heard. Is it really is an oral exam of, did you do your prep? How do you describe certain moments on the fly? How are you going to sound? And there is always that little jitter that I have right before we start off a match, or right when my voice hits the venue of, like, I can say whatever I want, and that's also exciting. It's also nerve wracking because you could say the wrong thing. But I don't know. I would love to be involved when it comes down to multiple roles if that opportunity came about. I really did enjoy the desk a lot. We'll see what happens moving into next year. But like I said, any opportunity to set up analysts, to set up, other people to talk more in depth about the game, any opportunity for me to just literally be on camera to talk about Call of Duty, I love that. So that's what I would say is what to expect out of me. I'll be doing it in some form or fashion, no matter what, including content, like I said. So
You mention people that you've taken inspiration from. Do you have any other inspirations or influences that you kind of take on in life and listen to?
Yeah, I would say, at least from like a sports side of things, I know I've talked about that a lot. I do take a lot of inspiration from Dan Patrick, who was for those that aren't aware of Dan Patrick, basically a legend at ESPN during like the 90s. He has the School of Sportscasting at Full Sail University, so I basically studied under him. So he was a big influence on me. To me, at least from who I've heard, is the greatest interviewer of all time. I think that he is just out of this world. And a lot of the things that I learned throughout the program involves different techniques and little things that he, implements or does and things like that. So I would say that he's a huge influence. Um, Really just different sportscasters who are out there in multiple games or in multiple different sports out there. Like I listen to a lot of college basketball, I listen to a lot of NBA, NFL. Even when it comes to Olympic time, I love when it comes down to the Olympics because I get to hear the best gymnastics commentators, the best swimming commentators, the best, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody who is just amazing at their craft. You get to hear that passion really come out during that time. And I would say, when it comes down to regular life stuff, my dad is a huge inspiration for me. He is somebody who kind of went against the grain a little bit in terms of our family. Went into the military. Ended up finishing out college and basically made a huge name for himself in terms of just what he was able to accomplish, what he was able to do. That work ethic that I try to strive for is basically, I wouldn't say like a competition to him, but it is in debt. It is an ode to what he was able to do. And it's like, if he can do this thing, if he was able to do all of this, he made my life so much easier because of all that work. If I can even do a sliver of that, how much greater is that going to make my life or my kids' lives, my wife, her life, all those things. And then I would say God. At the end of the day, I am a follower of Jesus Christ, and I would say He is the greatest inspiration for me in every sense of the word. So we hit a lot of things. We hit a lot of things, but in terms of tiers, in terms of categories, that's where we sit, man.
It's always great to have people to look up to because you always need guiding in life, however it be bad, good, however it is, you always need somebody to look up to, somebody to kind of
Definitely.
take inspiration from. But if we were to sum this podcast up, approaching nearly 45 minutes of your time, what bit of advice would you give, whether it be life related, gaming related, anything? If somebody just stopped you, what would you say to them?
Yeah, man. I mean, in terms of when it comes down to like your career, when it comes down to just your life in general, um, I don't know exactly what I would resort to first, but I would just say, do what you love. That to me has been a huge thing for me, especially as I've gotten older, is the whole aspect of going after what it is that you truly love to do. And that was the reason why I decided to venture off from playing basketball, was jumping into Call of Duty esports commentary. Like, of all the things out there that exist, it's like, why would you decide to do that? Like, I don't even know if there was more than like 5 people in the world who technically had that position when I made the jump to do it. But I knew that I loved it, and I would say that was one of the greatest decisions that I've ever made. Was deciding to say, you know what, I'm gonna, despite what has been me dedicating my entire life, because a lot of people, they had an injury and then they decided to go into esports, or I was playing this sport, I got injured, and then I ended up picking up a controller and I really liked it. I actually made the decision, I was not injured, I basically was like, you know what, I'm gonna go for this thing. I'm not gonna try to be a professional player, I want to commentate. um and like I said, it was the greatest decision that I've ever made, was going with what I did technically love more. It was a hard decision because it was basically number one versus number two. And I'm very glad that I went with number one. Not to say that I wouldn't be happy with where my life would have been if I didn't maybe jump into Call of Duty at first. Maybe I would be jumping in right now at this point in my life, or maybe I'd be 3, 4 years behind, whatever it may be. But I would definitely say one of the first pieces of advice that I can speak up from personally is to do what you love. You'll never regret it. You'll always, best person to bet on is yourself. And so you can never, go a day of being like, gosh, I relied on this or I relied on that. As long as you're always betting on yourself, as long as you're always allowing for yourself to succeed by doing something that you love to do, you always be happy. You can always sleep well at the end of the night, knowing that you did what you could, you did what you really wanted to do. And that's what I would say, man. That's what I would say is the first thing that comes to mind is do what you love, Make your passion your paycheck is always the typical quote, which I like those quotes to be honest, but they do get oversaturated. But it doesn't leave the fact that it is something that I would definitely mention to a lot of people.
Well, with that all in mind, you gave your story, you've talked about Call of Duty, you've made me smile, you've made me sad with thinking about it be you and your daughter and your wife. But it's quite cute and lovely, but thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely, man. Hey, I appreciate you for inviting me on. Again, I apologize for it taking as long as it did. But I will say, I got more questions than Rambo Ray. Now, can we get like an applause about that on Reddit? I was told that right before the podcast started. I had more questions than Rambo Ray. That's the microphone dropper. I can't actually drop it, or that wouldn't be good. This is a very expensive microphone, but if I could drop it, I would do that right now.